24th plan call. Ms. Ripito.
Chair Bartoni,
Here.
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Farmer, Councilmember Flasher,
Here.
Councilmember Kalani,
Here.
Councilmember McCutcheon,
Here.
Councilmember Ottenberg, Councilmember Rambo. And we have a quorum.
Thank you. We have a full agenda. As you know, we skipped the December meeting to allow staff some time with their family around the holidays. So we got quite a few items to go through today. We'll start with the approval of minutes from our November 15th meeting. Looking for a motion for approval made by Dan Flasher, seconded by Teresa Clark. Any discussion, any questions? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Thank you. That takes us to the public input portion on the agenda. I see we have one attendee. If you would like to speak, if you could use the raised hand feature, please. Okay, I'm going to assume that they do not, and we don't have anybody in the audience, so doesn't look like we will have any public participation. That takes us to our action items, starting with the planning matters. We have 3 items. Starting with the Hawks Trail Drive, Mr. Bunich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as you can see, the projectors acting up a little bit. So hopefully your screens give you a better image than what's on the wall behind the dais. And Ms. Ripito provided you paper copies of all of the information that we would typically use on a share screen or PowerPoint. My apologies, Mr. Newberry, our tech whiz, tried many different approaches to remove the purple tint. He was unsuccessful. So again, our apologies. It's technology, and it's about all I can say about it. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as you'll recall, at a recent city council meeting, Councilmember Jaxie requested that this particular item be forwarded to committee for consideration. This item relates to a plat in the Hawks Rest subdivision. This particular plat was approved in August of 1995, just several days before the incorporation of the city. The plat is unique in that it contains a portion of the road that was platted with the original Hawks Rest subdivision back in the late 1970s. And then a small area that's hatchered that was done at that platting in 1995. Unfortunately, St. Louis County did not require an escrow to ensure a road of a certain standard would be constructed. And so for the most part, since the incorporation of the city, there's been an ongoing debate about how best to get a road surface in there that is acceptable and safe for EMS, fire, police, and etc. Ultimately, the department approached the problem by saying that anyone seeking a building permit on any of those lots served by that hatchered area would first have to address the road condition. That obviously was problematic for people that had purchased a lot and had hopes of building a dream home on those lots and being told they couldn't until the road was satisfactorily addressed. The matter reached a point where City Council was asked to consider an approach different than that. And that approach ultimately, based upon a lot of discussion by City Council, was to create an escrow process. And as each lot were to come in for permits, they would be required to deposit a $5,000 amount that would ultimately be used to improve the road to a satisfactory condition, not necessarily a city standard condition. A escrow was collected from Mr. Alsop, the owner of Lot 5. That owner is the only person that's paid the escrow at this stage. 2 of the lots remain vacant. The others did install a portion of the road that was done. Photographs from previous presentations indicate the condition of that road. So tonight, the committee is being asked to consider the current policy, if it's reasonable or not, and if not, what might be the best approach to address Mr. Alsop's request for the return of the $5,000. In the memorandum near its conclusion, the department does offer some options. The first is to discontinue the collection of the escrow, return the $5,000 to Mr. Alsop, and treat the road issue, if it comes to that point, as either a property maintenance or nuisance enforcement. Certainly, the department can do such. We just don't do property maintenance necessarily to buildings and structures. It can be lawn areas as well as roadways. Or it can be a nuisance, meaning that it creates such a hazard. It's a nuisance to the general public's health, safety, and welfare. Another option is to continue on with our current policy, wait for the remaining 2 vacant lots to develop, and collectively a total of $15,000 would be available for repairs. As you recall, Mr. Alsop submitted a bid that showed that that was woefully inadequate to address the road, given its current condition. And then finally, we could just say to the owner of Lot 5, we have $5,000 of your escrow. Fix the major problems in the road, whether it be potholes, alligator cracking, or just the edges breaking. And once you've addressed the major problems in the road, we'll return to you your $5,000. Those are just a few options. I'm sure as a committee, you may have others in mind, and the department would be glad to hear those, include them in whatever recommendation the committee would like to make. And the intent is to have this back to City Council at its next meeting in February. And with that, I'll conclude, and Melanie and I are available for any questions or comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah, go ahead.
It's on.
Yes.
There are 10 lots. Is that
There are 10 lots in the plat, but as you can see from the image that's on your screen, Yellow Road was platted with the original Hawks Rest subdivision. So that's back in the 70s. Those lots have access to a road, a private street that is maintained by the homeowners association. It's that Hatchard area that was added on. What I think happened is when the original plat was recorded, those 5 lots that are served by the Hatchard area was just one big lot. And the owner, Pierce Lieberman, came in and subdivided them into 5 instead of 1. He created the easement. But again, St. Louis County didn't address the condition of the road.
so a minute ago you said that one of the homeowners improved part of the road? Which
Yes.
one is that? What lot is that?
Well, Mr. Hugh Plunkett, who owned Plunkett Furniture in Baldwin, he purchased a couple of the lots and on a condition, and this was before we came up with the escrow, on a condition that for a building permit, he basically came in and paved it. Now, we required a certain specification for the paving and the work that wasn't met. Mr. Plunkett finished the home, and then I believe he lost the other lot in bankruptcy or something. So it has a checkered past out there. It seems like everybody that touches one of those lots ends up having an issue or a problem, notwithstanding Mr. Alsop, who has built a nice home there.
So what number of the lots did he have, Mr. Plunkett?
It was on the what I would call the right-hand side of the road, and I believe it's I can't see it.
5 at all.
Number 8, I believe, Miss McCutcheon.
So right in the middle, there's paved road, and then there's not on either ends. Is that?
Pardon, ma'am.
So there's a paved road like in front of 8, but there's not one anywhere else.
No, actually, Mr. Plunkett did put down asphalt along the entire Hatchard area.
Oh,
It was just, he didn't do it to the required width we had hoped, and certainly the specification was much thinner than we had asked.
and there's only 2 families that live in these plots.
Yes, there are only, actually, there's only 2 vacant lots left. So there are 3 homes in that portion of the subdivision or plat. The aerial you have is older and it doesn't reflect the current condition as well. And this is the best available aerial we have. It's from St. Louis County.
I got one more question. So the third party, did they contribute to the road?
Again, that was prior to the escrow, and they were part of, I believe, Mr. Plunkett's effort. So a lot of this, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to shift, but Public Works was involved in this more so than I during that road construction component and how all that worked together. The establishment of the escrow was within the last 5 years, so it's pretty recent.
Thank you.
Mike, go ahead, please, and I got you next to it. So
Yeah, I've got a couple questions. So first question is, of these 10 lots, right, that encapsulate the whole area there, how many actual homes are there on those 10 lots that are being lived in right now?
I think my analysis was that there's 2 in this particular section that remain vacant. And then in that other portion of the 10 lot plat, there's like 2 others. So there's 6 with homes on them and 4 without.
Okay, and then is there an established HOA for those?
Well, the developer, Pierce Lieberman, was required by St. Louis County to become a plat of Hawks Rest. The homeowners association will not provide services to the roadway until such time it meets a certain standard. And so they're saying until you basically improve it, we're not going to basically pay our contractors to plow, salt, and do preventative maintenance. And so that's part of the rub as well. Mr. Alsup's on a substandard road, and the homeowners association has told them clearly, until it's improved, we're not going to maintain it for you.
So I guess my question is then, and just to clarify one more time, I know this all happened in the 70s before Wildwood was incorporated, but who is legally responsible for that road inside the development? If not the HOA?
The way the plat describes it is all owners of lots in the plat are responsible for the road. They all have rights, or all have responsibilities.
So I guess then my suggestion, I guess, or my input on this would be, we've got 5,000 from Mr. Alsup in lot 5, right? And so then there's 5 other people that live there that haven't contributed anything towards this being taken care of. Obviously, I think it's got to be an all or nothing situation. And obviously we can't hold one person's money indefinitely if nothing's being done. And obviously, I think when we talked about this last time, it was $100,000 or something to fix it. So I think we either need to figure out, have it assessed, and then every one of those 6 people has to contribute an equal 1/6 of the cost of fixing that road if we determine that that is what has to happen. Or in the meantime, if not, we need to return his money and get rid of the escrow account, because obviously it doesn't make any sense to hold one person's money hostage if it's not enough to take care of the problem, or if nothing can be done. I don't think that's fair, and I don't know why they ever set up that escrow account for one person. But yeah, I mean, and I don't know, have we looked at what the cost would be to just provide additional, like re-asphalt it on what's there already for that one portion?
Mr. Alsup provided that bid, and as I recall, it was well into the tens of thousands of dollars to make basically a rural roadway, which is the city standard. So even with the collection of the 2 additional escrows for the vacant lots, the amount won't come close to do what the bid that Mr. Alsup provided to.
And I mean, there are some private drives and areas where there's maybe multiple homes that are on gravel throughout Wildwood, correct?
Yes, actually, that's what this particular road was as the lots were platted and offered for sale. It was a gravel road. And our position was, is we adopted the rural roadway standards. That's why we've been seeking the asphalt component. And as I say, I believe it was Mr. Plunkett basically proceed forward with some building permits, ultimately did put down a lift of asphalt, but it's not going to last forever. And it wasn't, as I say, what the city had anticipated.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if Mr. Alsop's able to get in and out of his property in a normal fashion, and it seems to be the case, obviously it's passable. And so I would advocate that we would return his $5,000 immediately. And, you know, and I mean, there's really not anything we could do unless the city's willing to take ownership of making the repair on the city's dime, which I don't think is really the responsibility of the city if we don't own that roadway. And otherwise the HOA, and if they don't seem to think that it's a problem enough that they're willing to all buck up and fix their own neighborhood street, then I would just advocate that we would leave it as is, because it doesn't really seem to me that there's a viable path to any type of solution. But in the meantime, we're holding this guy's $5,000 hostage with really no meaningful reason, as far as I can tell.
Well, and again, just so you're clear, our approach now is if there's a road to be constructed as part of a plat, we require an escrow. And we ensure then that the developer has enough money in a letter of credit or cash so that if something goes wrong, that road can still be constructed.
And these folks built these homes though, and bought these lots
Mhm.
with an understanding that that's the way it was, and there was no road there. And obviously this was all done in the 70s. So it was before there was any incorporation. So I would,
Thank you. And before I get to Teresa, if I remember correctly, also for the city to take ownership or responsibility on up a private road, we require it to be up to our city standards first anyway, correct?
Correct, but you'd probably have to go 1.5 miles on private street from Route 100 to get to this portion if we were to take it for public maintenance. So that's, in all intents and purposes, is not something that's even offered as an option.
Okay. Teresa, go ahead.
Thank you. I agree that this is, if we've got the 5 homes on that hatched road, right? 5. And, if $5,000 a piece doesn't do it, I say that each one needs to contribute the 5,000 and put it in escrow, whether there's a home on there or not, there's an owner of that property. And they need to, if that's our code now, is it an ordinance?
Well, at the time of platting, we had regulations in our subdivision and development code that basically says that if you're platting a large lot, single family subdivision, you have to build a road to our rural roadway standards.
Okay, so then, keeping that in mind, then if each one of them, has to pay a portion of that, I very much question the 100,000 or whatever the quote was on fixing that road, because we just had our road, which to me, when I drive this road with all the alligatoring and potholes, it looks a lot like my road did before, which is much longer than this. And we just had it resurfaced, completely resurfaced for 35,000. So I question the high amount, which would have been, what if there's 5 of them? Even if it's 40,000. It's a little bit more than their 5,000 escrow, but to get the road fixed, they need to do it, or they need to all get together and go to this HOA and say, we live in this subdivision. At the end of your subdivision, there's only one way to get here, and get the HOA involved. If everybody pitches in and the whole Hawks Rest, it's not going to be that much. So those are the 2 options I would think, because it's going to cost a lot to resurface it, especially now with the costs going up. But I don't think it's anywhere near 100,000 to do that stretch of road.
Again, I'm thinking it's in the tens of thousands. I'm not sure if it's 100,000. I'd have to take a quick look at the information.
Thank you. Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, as I recall, it was at least $100,000, but my first question is, can we provide him relief from our city standard? In other words, that's an expensive roadway because sometimes we specify curbs and extra wide, like I forget, it's like 18 feet or something like that. Can we just let him pave? Like my driveway is 8.5, 9 feet wide. Can we just let them do a good job, as Teresa suggested, on paving? Because her road's not up to what I would expect to be our standard, but it's a perfectly nice road and it serves more homes than this. Is that a possibility? I'm looking for this guy's got a sunk cost of $5,000, but it's sitting there doing nothing. $5,000 is a drop in the bucket. Maybe we can get the road repaired for his $5,000 and he'll feel better about things because it adds to his resale and so on and so forth. But right now he just needs the money and it seems unfair not to hang on. It's unfair to hang on to it. So I'm just trying to find a solution that doesn't cause us as a city serious problems down the road.
In a couple of instances with support of the fire district, where the proposed road just serves, let's say, less than a handful of lots, we've gone to a 12-foot width. And we require certain bump outs so that if an emergency vehicle is coming up the road, anybody on the road can pull off and be out of the way. The fire district still requires that the asphalt accommodate about 75,000 pounds of gross vehicle weight, which is
okay.
the pumper. And so from that perspective, we have on a couple of occasions given some relief because of the circumstances. And certainly this could be one where we would look at that and say, there's only 5 lots at the end of the cul-de-sac. And the roads leading into it aren't much greater than 12 feet in width. They do accommodate two cars passing each other, but they're certainly not our 20-foot width that we require under a rural roadway.
Is that a meaningful cost saving for the guy? I mean,
the width would probably be meaningful, meeting the specification to accommodate the 75,000 pounds. That's still going to be, that's a high standard.
yeah, that's a roadbed that deep.
It's a pretty thick, it's a thick layer of gravel and certainly a couple of lifts of asphalt at a pretty good thickness as well.
Yeah, okay, so that's a pricey road. So that's the difference, Teresa, between this guy and what you guys paid is just he has to have this immense roadbed, and it's expensive. So you mentioned you could just return the money and consider this a nuisance potentially or something else. You had another term.
Property maintenance.
I'm sorry.
Property maintenance.
So that would mean the city would have to get involved and force these guys to do something anyway, but then it would be collective rather than his money just flapping there in the breeze. This does not feel fair to this guy, especially in financial straits, because the money's not enough to do anything. And it doesn't sound like we have any good solution. Is there any way to do like a requirement of the remaining owners if they could, we can't charge them escrow sort of in arrears or anything like that. Can we make it so that if this road is further developed, that everybody has to kick in for the escrow again? I mean, is that it seems kind of backwards, but I'm just looking to return the guy's money.
From the department's perspective, if we weren't to continue with the current policy, probably the next best option to me is just to treat it as a future property maintenance or nuisance issue. That's from the department's perspective, really the only way we're going to get cooperation from any of the other property owners.
Would the HOA fold into that somehow?
I don't know. That's probably a good question for the city attorney, but as I say, I think looking at it from the perspective, if it reaches a condition where the fire marshal is saying, hey, we're having problems getting there, or we just are concerned about response times, et cetera, then that's a good way to start that process and say, there's a certain level of improvements that are needed to meet minimum property maintenance standards.
And then all the owners, whether there's a home there or not, would be liable
Yes.
to provide that.
Yes, I would start with the 5 most impacted because again, as you can see, that portion of the road was platted well after the remainder as part of that 1995 action by St. Louis County.
So would it be a stupid recommendation for us to say, give the guy his money back and we'll address it as a nuisance property in your mind, or
Well, it's one of the options the department provided, yes.
that doesn't answer my question? What's your opinion?
Well, like I say, if we don't stay with the current policy, because again, remember the current policy allowed the city to authorize the building of the home and the permits to be issued by St. Louis County. So we were clear, we won't issue you permits unless you pay the escrow. And there may have been some objection, but the escrow was paid. So we kept up our end of the bargain. But certainly I see the conflict here, because even if the 2 vacant lots were to develop, we only have $15,000.
Yeah.
And so from that perspective, as Ms. Clark mentioned, the more people that get involved and work on the solution, the less cost to each individual there is.
Further along than I was. Go ahead. That's
Okay, Deborah, go ahead, and Mike, I got you next.
Yeah, I think I agree with Teresa. I mean, I think it's the property owner's responsibility to go ahead and make sure that the road is passable and that the fire department or emergency services can get to them. So I'm with her, if they all kick in, I mean, it's the same thing as an HOA fee that you pay every year. I don't understand why the HOA, 1, doesn't get involved, and 2, I think, this is the road that's close to their property. They're the ones who need the road. So I think they should just all pitch in the amount of money to, get the road to where it has to be. I'm not saying it has to be top standard, maybe not just city standard, but so that it's, usable and the emergency equipment can get through.
And again, as I've defined in other reports on this matter, 2 of the 10 lots are not served by Hawks Trail Drive. They're actually off of Hawks Rest Drive. And those are the 2, I wish we had better graphics. And then that means 8 are served by Hawks Trail Drive. 3 of those were not part of the road dedication along their frontage. So certainly we can engage those property owners, the 10 lot owners in the plat, but I'm thinking that it's going to be a difficult discussion because some don't even use the road and the others were the beneficiaries of the original Hawks Rest plat dedication and have a road that is passable.
Thank you. Mike, go ahead, and Teresa, you're next.
Yeah, so I'm looking through this and talking about this. I think whenever the initial decision was made by city council to impose the escrow, right? So basically at that point, there was only 3 lots that were undeveloped when they imposed that escrow, because the 1 was developed since and he paid the 5 and there's 2 remaining vacant that haven't. So, I mean, in my opinion, it was a flawed policy that was implemented from day 1 by the council, as much as I hate to say it, because at the very least, you were going to collect a maximum of $15,000 in escrow money, assuming all 3 lots were developed at some point, which, even back then would have not been enough to do what they're needing to do. So, I agree with Rob in the sense that, I mean, it's got to be a collective approach where everybody's going to be held accountable and put in an equal share to get this thing done when and if it becomes a nuisance, that we have the legal ability to enforce that. But in the meantime, I think we just need to give the guy his 5,000 back so that he's on the same level playing field with his neighbors, and then treat it as a nuisance issue. And when and if it becomes, like I said, whatever that threshold is that we have, or the fire marshal states that it has to be addressed, whether that's a month or a year or whenever, then we can, whatever our legal capabilities are to impose an assessment or whatever that might be for everybody involved that owns those lots, whether developed or not. But to hold this one guy's $5,000 in escrow indefinitely when there's nothing that can be done with it and there's nothing being done with it, I think is just a futile, unfair approach. So I would advocate we give him his money back and, like Rob said, treat it as a nuisance. And I think the original policy to create the escrow was made no sense, honestly, in and of itself from day one.
Thank you. And before we go to Teresa, and Deborah might help me, I kind of remember this a few years ago, but I don't remember the details of it. I don't think what the council discussed targeted this specific area, though. I think it was more a rural road, and I think this one just kind of got caught in the switches, if I remember right, but I might not be remembering it right either.
Well, at that time, we had a couple down on Whitsett Fork, the can't remember the name, Stones Throw Estates Plat 1, Stones Throw Estates Plat 2. So we were dealing with a couple of them at the same time. And so we were doing the same kind of approach to in that Whitsett Fork area, take an escrow, and then at best try to address it as part of a collective amount and fix the road. So again, it was all part of a larger issue.
Right. Teresa, go ahead.
Yeah, I just keep coming back to, we have a code and we need to stick with it. And in my opinion, well, first I have a question. These 10 plots that are in this, this dotted area, what is that one HOA or is all of Hawks Rest the HOA?
All of Hawks Rest.
All of Hawks Rest. Okay, so if I'm just thinking, put myself in his shoes, if I had that $5,000 escrow and no one else did, and I needed that road fixed so that I could get it back, I would go to the HOA and I would fight there. I would say, look, this is part of the HOA. We're in the area. We're part of you. We need to have help from each one of these places, count up the houses, see how much it would be to pay for the road, and ask them, please, can we get together and fix this road? And then he can have his 5,000 back, right?
Well, certainly, but knowing what I know from other negotiations with homeowners associations, the likelihood of having somebody pay for a road they'll never use, regardless of the amount, it's asking a lot of those that are part of the other plats that have no real need for the road to be improved because they don't access it.
I would agree, except for it depends on who lives there, because like my house down at the hill at the bottom, there's only 2 of us that use the road that goes all the way down there.
Right.
And there was no question when we resurfaced the roads that the whole thing was going to be done. It all is part of our subdivision. It's not, and there's only a few of us that has to pay for the whole thing. So I would say there would probably be quite a few people that would agree that that needs to be done in their neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hold on one second, Deborah. So, Joe, I got a couple questions. So as a city, I mean, you put policies in place for a reason, and I think that the spirit of this was done in the right reason. And I think we just have like a very weird situation here. But if we, decide to give the guy his money back, does the city attorney chimed in at all? Like, you don't want the city to become liable for something because we went outside of our policies.
Mr. Cross, Mr. Young, and I have had a number of conversations relative to this. And that's why up until this point, when the matter came to the committee, we basically have said, we'll stay the course, which is keep collecting the escrow because we've made it clear from the onset that was the policy.
So I guess where I want to go next, Deborah, just because you've spoken twice and I don't want to like get outside of our rules and stuff, but I'm offering, does anybody want to make a motion? Because then we can kind of debate the motion itself. So go ahead, Mike.
I would make a motion that we return the $5,000 to the gentleman in lot 5 and label the property as a nuisance or whatever the determination you were talking about, Joe. And that the city treated as such moving forward, and that I think that's the only viable, seemingly legal path forward that would ever put us in a position to be able to hold the other property owners accountable. And I think the only way you're going to have any chance at addressing this is a unified approach with everybody that owns a property there being held accountable at the same time, by the way, as opposed to, so whether, like I said, and the fire marshal might determine that is 2 months from now. I don't know, depending on and I think if we do that, we could even take the initiative of sending the fire marshal out there to inspect it himself, to where if he makes that determination, it could be pretty soon around the corner to where they come back. But then, Mr. Young could guide us on that, but we could take a legal approach to saying that everybody, getting an actual bid and then saying it's 30,000 and each member of these 5 lots is responsible for their share of that to get it done, because the cities, I just think that gives us an actual path to address the issue. Whereas right now, where we sit today, we're just hanging on to this guy's $5,000, but nothing's happening.
Okay, so before I ask for a second, do we want to actually have included in the motion that we're labeling the property a nuisance, or we don't want to do that?
It's
No,
just,
we just want to have that
Yeah.
is a direction we could go. So like your motion.
No, so I'm just saying at this point, we
Okay.
return the guy's $5,000 until further action becomes necessary.
Okay, do we have a second on that? Second, and like Robin, hold on one second. Deborah, go ahead. Is it still appropriate? I hope.
Well,
And then Robin.
I wanted to think, you guys can decide if this, I wanted to know what the approach was that was taken for Wittick's Fork and how that turned out.
Well, one of the developers, a gentleman named Greg Sansone, ultimately paved the road. He was the developer. He ultimately did it because we just found it to be an easier solution than arguing with the people he sold the lots with. The other individual property owners did sections along their frontages. And it took a long time, but it was finally completed. So
And so that's kind of where I was going. This developer, where are we with him? Has he been approached?
yes, in fact, he was taken to court years ago. And the circuit court, I think, made a judgment, but didn't change anything. So yeah, there's been legal action. Ryan Thomas had to testify as the director of public works, et cetera. So it has a long history.
Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you, Rob.
Yeah, I would just like to get our city attorney's opinion on this act, the wisdom of this action. And the feasibility of having the entire HOA, chip in on this. And I would also like to know if we can provide meaningful relief from our standard, because, for example, I put in a driveway. I used this fabric that they use to cross the tundra in Alaska with big machines. And if you compact 6 inches of gravel on top of that, it will carry anything. And if they did the minimal job before they did the substandard paving job, it will support traffic. And I don't see any reason to have a 18-foot wide driveway through here, particularly if it's cul-de-sac at the end, because the pumpers can drag their hoses several hundred feet. So I'm hoping we can get some meaningful relief and make this a reasonable cost for the HOA to do a paving job that will let them maintain it and plow it and so on and so forth. Is that possible?
Certainly, as I said, we we've done it in the past in these unique circumstances. Oftentimes it's maybe just there's lesser lots, but we do not have a situation like this that exists anywhere else in Wildwood that I know of. This is very different. And so I think the difference that that exists at this particular location would justify us doing the minimum necessary to meet the fire district's requirements.
Great. And so my question to you is, do you have any knowledge of the road bed? I know that the paving job is substandard, but I'm wondering if they put in a reasonable road bed, which means the problem is not as bad as we think it's going to be.
Well, I'm going back a long way, but I did drive on that gravel road many times and it's compacted well. So from that perspective, they've got a great base to start with.
Okay, so it may not be that expensive. All right, so that's good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion on the floor, and basically our motion is in your summary of the material is option number 1.
Correct.
Okay, so to refund the gentleman his escrow and no longer collect escrow in the future for this particular subdivision, I guess. Mike, is that correct, Mike? Is that what your intent was?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
And I will verify with the city attorney before this reaches city council that what's being proposed, at least in terms of the option 1, is acceptable.
okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
I,
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Any abstentions?
Motion passes by a majority vote.
Okay, and then, okay, that's it. All right. Next item on the agenda is the Center Avenue plan progress. Mr. Munich, this is for you as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, the department wanted to give you an update on Center Avenue. As you know, the city was successful in obtaining all 21 quitclaim deeds. They now have been recorded, which means Center Avenue, for all intents and purposes, is now a public street. The department would like to proceed forward with the development of an updated engineering plan. As many of you may recall, over the course of time, a plan was developed by Dorian Engineering. That plan was a key component in presenting the city's argument for making the street public. But over time, there have been development of a number of new homes and lots. There have been additional dedications, and there's been modifications to the actual properties themselves in terms of grade, slopes, and stormwater. So tonight, the department is respectfully requesting the authorization to contact Dorian Engineer and seek a proposal for the update of the engineered plans. Once the proposal is in hand, the department would then present it to committee for consideration. The department is not necessarily seeking additional bids because, as I've mentioned, Dorian's done all the work and the resurvey of the properties. So from a standpoint of just timing and cost, they will be the low cost because of just the information they have in hand already. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody want to make that? Oops. Does anybody want to make that motion, Teresa?
I will make the motion to go ahead with the department's recommendation.
Okay, do we have a second? Seconded by Mr. Galani. Any questions, comments? Deborah, go ahead, please.
Joe, I thought when this whole thing began that the developer was supposed to put the road in.
Well, Mr. Wayland has set aside money in both Old Town Park. We'll set aside money in Wesley Park, and we have money also in Stone Mill, which has a bit of frontage on Center Avenue. So there is a good amount of money set aside that will be contributed by Wayland Custom Homes to the improvement.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else?
And just one other thing,
Sure.
Mr. Chair. As part of the agreement to get the quitclaim deeds, Mr. Wayland will be running sanitary sewer to 3 of the lots that are on septic systems at this time. So he's made a pretty substantial commitment.
Thank you. Any other comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is the recent development trends within Wildwood. This is typically just an FYI information, unless anybody has any questions for the department. Teresa, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question about a couple of things. The Mergen Temple, is there any way that we can get with the owner, the developer, or somebody and walk the area with them, and so they can point out where things are going to be located?
Certainly, I'd be glad to initiate that conversation, and if there's a particular week, day, time that would work best for the majority. If we get obviously a quorum, we have to post it, but if you just wanted to do it individually, I'm sure they wouldn't mind.
I guess I would want to know how many people would want to walk that with me. I'd really like to see where they're going to put it, since that neighborhood is so close.
Yes, Mr. Chair, with your permission, what I will do is I'll contact the leadership of the temple, explain that there is an interest on walking the site by the committee members, and if there is no objection, they would just respond back and say yes, then you all could do it at your leisure, or if you want accompaniment, I can certainly ask the engineer for the temple to be there. So I'll get something out to them and then let you know what their response is.
Great. Thank you. Did you have something else, Teresa?
I had a second question about the anniversary park. You mentioned that the current lighting bases are spun aluminum. What is the alternative material that you're looking at to use for those, and what are the advantages and cost benefits, et cetera?
Well, certainly, just from the perspective of the spun aluminum, they have lasted almost 20 years. So it's not like they've not been a reasonable investment. But from the department's perspective, we've not done a lot of investigation yet, but the intent would be is to look at different materials and find something that maybe is a little bit more resistant to weather. As you know, when it rains, it just slides down the pole, it captures at the base, and it just takes a little bit, it takes time. We were surprised that the one light by the parking lot actually started to crink, and that's why we proactively removed it. But I'll have a lot more information as we get close to making the decision to spend the funds.
And just to follow up on that, what's the plan for the other, you say you want to do the two lights and the shingles, and what's the plan for the other three lights?
Well, based upon the assessment that's been conducted, the two are the one that has been removed and the one nearest the playground probably need to be replaced first. The others don't seem to be in as bad a condition, but if there is a cost advantage to replacing all five at the same time, or if the cost is less than what we anticipate, then I would bring to the committee a recommendation to do all at the same time.
Mike, go ahead. Oh,
Yeah, I have a question.
Just real quickly on the anniversary park.
on the anniversary park, since it's next on our agenda, can we just,
I thought we sort of skipped forward and I missed.
no, I'm just kind of like, no, that's all right. I should have yeah.
I had one thing on the trend.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Sorry.
I hate to drag it, but I brought this up back, I think, in like July or August regarding, Teresa asked about the Murugan temple, I was asking about the Durga temple. According to the original plans from the beginning of 2022 in January, I think they were supposed to have it like completed by June or July or something to that effect. Now, here we are in almost February of 2023, and honestly, it looks very little different than it did 8 months ago. I know initially they told us that there was a delay due to some oil drainage that they needed to do for the plumbing or whatnot, but that's all plumbing and interior work. And I'm talking about the exterior of the property. I mean, I see like, and I drive past there twice every single day. So it's an eyesore with just the whole excavation of the area. And then, I mean, literally, it looks like it's taken them like 5 or 6 months to do one side of the gray, like concrete, like what are they doing, like the stucco or whatever they're painting on there. There's never more than 1 or 2 cars over their tops with 1 or 2 guys at any given time. And many times there's nobody working there on during the week on any days. So I guess my question is like, are they having a financial problem that's precluding them from being able to, because it's certainly not due to the weather or any other types of conditions that would. I'm just trying to, we're going on a year and a half and almost a year longer than what their original timeline was. How long? Because, and I talk to people that live in Garden Valley over there too, that are, that, and I don't know how. It's kind of like, when it's done, they'll be able to look at the temple, but right now it's just this eyesore and it's just sitting there like that. So I just didn't know if there was any type of action that could be done.
As you know, when last question about this, the department did provide an update that identified that the plumbing associated with the temple had to be redesigned because of a certain part of the ceremony that uses oils, and they found in other temples across the county that it clogs the piping and creates a major issue. That only took 6 weeks, the redesign and then the approval of the plan. So that's certainly not the excuse for the delay now. Most recently, we received the plans for the septic system. Septic system is designed by a good engineer, but most of the soil information referenced Jefferson County. So it was like, well, we're not in Jefferson County. So we sent back the plans with a list of comments. The condition of the site, our code enforcement officers have identified it on multiple occasions. The balance we're trying to strike is if we do a stop work because they're not completing it, we're adding to the delays. So, but I'll have code enforcement go out and make sure that, let's say we can get it in a more fashionable appearance.
Yeah, I don't know if the city has any type of recourse regarding like fines or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
regarding
definitely.
timelines, because
Yes.
the exterior of the building, I mean, it would be nice if they could at least just get the building itself finished, so it looks like a completed building at some level versus just this hodgepodge of like, I don't know, just something, I've never seen
Yep.
anything that's taken that long to be constructed.
Yes, and it is one of those things where the building permit is active and they are working. And so I'll have to contact St. Louis County and see if there's a due diligence clause or something, that it actually gets, there is actual progress more so than just, let's say, incremental progress. But I'm afraid I may have to tell you all that as long as they're working on it, the permit's active, and that's the best I can offer you. But we can certainly address the condition of the site.
Follow up, that's it.
Yep. No, I understand. I go by and I think, man, it's taking a long time.
Okay, that takes us to park matters. We have 8 of those, which we have a nice segue into the anniversary park improvements. Mr. Munich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. As was briefly discussed, the department has done an assessment of Anniversary Park, one of the first parks to be developed by the city of Wildwood and obviously opened at our 10-year anniversary date. In that assessment, we just identified 3 areas that we'd like to proceed forward with improvements. First is the roofing shingles on the pavilion. They are the originals. The assessment that was done both by our contractor, Glenn Gailey, and then followed up by our park inspector, Frank Laughlin, indicates that they need to be replaced as soon as possible. We did receive 2 bids. We're waiting on a third, but for the most part, the bids have ranged between $400 to $5,500. A water fountain replacement. The water fountain is an item we maintain regularly all year long. It leaks and there's just a single part that seems to be deficient and we have to replace that part. This water fountain's been discontinued, so that part's getting harder and harder to find. So we'd like to maybe start fresh with a new water fountain there, something that's consistent with what people expect in parks now, which usually is a small dog bowl at the bottom and then another spigot to fill bottles that they bring along on their walks. And then finally, the light poles, which we did address. We know that there's generally about a $2,500 fee. There is also some discussion, and again, this is more so information that will be provided to you as we develop a little bit more. There is additional information that maybe we could switch out some of the light standards with bollard lighting and do like we did in the north end of Community Park, which I think is very effective. It provides visibility and safety, but not necessarily the bright lights that we struggle with here in Wildwood at times with our night sky. So tonight I'm asking again to proceed forward with the re-roofing of the pavilion area and replace at least 2 of the light standards. There's additional information coming on the light standards. So tonight, maybe the best I would ask is that you authorize the re-roofing not to exceed the $5,500 maximum limit. And then when we get to council, then we would have the other bid and adjust accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Anybody want to make the motion? Deborah? Oh, go ahead.
So. The water faucet. Do we live on all that part?
Just the community park.
This anniversary part?
Yes.
And
No, not necessarily. It's an option that we can certainly explore if the committee would like, but yes, we shut it off at sometime around early November and we don't open it again until sometime late March, early April.
this is a whole.
Oh, different trades do these different projects. We're getting a roofer for the pavilion and shingles. We'll get a plumber for the water fountain. We'll get an electrician for the lights. And Fry Associates, the playground provider, is doing the installation of the new playground set. That was ordered in mid-December. As I think I mentioned in the report, as I thought I had put, no, it was in an update. We anticipate the delivery sometime this spring, and we hope to have it in by summer.
Okay, do we have a second on that? Seconded by Councilmember Clark. Any other questions or
I did.
comments? Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, I've only been there a couple times and I don't recall the pavilion, but it doesn't make sense to me to go ahead and do regular 3-tab shingles. The cost would just be a few $100 to get something 40 years, a 40-year shingle. And architecturally, they look lots better. Aesthetically, it's just a better deal. And so I'm wondering if we could, I don't know if I can make a modification at this late date, or if you can just go ahead and get the pricing for upgraded shingles, because the cost of the project, it's just minimal.
Certainly we can price it out, and if it's within that $5,500 range, then when we bring the report to City Council, we'll identify it at that time.
I just think it makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All righty, thank you, everyone. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, the bid process for hardcourt area in Community Park. Ms. Ripito.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as you well know, the committee has been planning and designing the hardcourt area throughout much of 2022 and ultimately agreed upon a design that included 4 pickleball courts as well as a tennis court that could also be used as 2 half-court basketball courts, as well as associated improvements like MSD and associated parking. So at the last meeting, the committee members approved a final set of plans for the bidding purpose. Since then, the department has contacted the designer of the facility and have worked with them to develop a schedule for the upcoming bid process. That schedule consists of January 26th, 2023. The department would like to advertise the final plans and specifications for bidding, which would be open until February 14th, 2023. in which the bids for contracting community are due and will be opened for viewing purposes and awarding. Then February 21st, the department plans to provide the bid information to the Planning and Parks Committee for consideration and recommendation, which would then be presented to the city council on March 13th. If all goes according to schedule, the department anticipates finalizing the contracts in April of 2023 and work to be authorized in May of 2023. So tonight, the department presents this timeline for consideration by the committee and welcomes any suggestions or changes that you might have. And with that, that concludes the department's presentation. However, myself or Mr. Vunich are available for any questions.
Thank you. So you're not looking for any action from the committee tonight,
Direction.
just direction, okay? Any? Okay. Any comments, questions? Teresa, go ahead, please.
I just have one question about, so the budget's 400,000.
Mhm.
It's strategic goal number 4. And on the strategic plan, I look at it and it still says that the cost to city is 200,000 and an expected funding amount of 392,000. I don't understand, what is that expected funding? Where is that coming from?
I would defer to Mr. Vunich on this one.
Well, Ms. Clark, as you recall, we went through a number of different scenarios for the design of this particular hardcourt area. At one point, we were trying to get the price down as low as possible and still provide some pickleball courts. Ultimately, the decision of the committee, then city council, was to build the facility as we originally wanted it, which included pickleball, tennis, and half-court basketball. In the bid that was provided by TerraSpec was that $392,000. That was that estimate that Mr. Keitel provided. And so in the capital improvements program, the department just rounded it up to 400,000. So that's where the 400,000 comes from, the capital improvements program for 2023. The 392,000 is the estimate from TerraSpec, the park designer. And then the lower end of that was one of the initial discussions we had.
Any other comments? My only question would be, it looks like the department's gonna put it out for bid Thursday. Is the department ready? Every year on schedule?
Yes, I received the final plans that the committee had endorsed for the area, which includes the amended soils, which was a point of discussion. I have the front end specs for the bidding process, which the contractor community needs, and we'll post it probably tomorrow afternoon, so that at 8 o'clock on Thursday morning, it's in the vestibule area, and we'll get it in the paper and see what happens on the website. According to Mr. Keitel, there's not a lot going on right at the moment, so he's hoping we'll get a lot of good bids.
Good, thank you. Look forward to it. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, the pedestrian bridge over at the Manors of Meadows of Cherry Hills, sorry. Mr. Vunich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. The department is bringing forth to you what it hopes to be the final change order relating to the pedestrian bridge that is under construction between the Manors at the Meadows of Cherry Hill subdivision and the Manors at the Enclaves subdivision. This particular change order relates to the restart of the project after a lengthy delay caused by the Gore Strip, which the committee is familiar with, as well as reassessing the easement locations that ultimately did save the Grand Tree. And the Grand Tree is in place, and it certainly looks good where it is with the wall structure. On your screens, I went out and just took a picture of the status of the project. And as you can see, all of the retaining walls, structural walls are in place. The pier system is in place for the pedestrian bridge, and they were rocking in the pathways for the new trail system. So despite it being January, a lot of progress has been made in a very short time. As you recall, we basically got back onto the site around mid-December after the Gore Strip was finalized. Tonight, as you can see, there is additional charges that come to approximately $15,500. Two of those charges relate specifically to the restart of the project, the staking of the site, that's survey work, and then extending permit with St. Louis County. As you know, per the direction of City Council, all city projects and parks do get building permits. The other is the stone caps for the new walls. Manufacturer identified these early on when we changed to the wall that they were anticipating a price hike, and so it's reflected here. One item that is the larger cost is the asphalt for the trail system. The original bidder, which was Build Pro Ltd., was about $10,000 for the paving work. That particular company has gone out of business. The general contractor, DJM, contacted two other sources of asphalt paving, Gershenson Construction being one, and the price went up by $12,000 to a total from $9,900 to almost $22,000. And so tonight, that is the nature of the change order. The department is respectfully requesting that the committee endorse the change order and allow the department to present an amended contract with DJM for the full amount. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Anybody want to make the motion made by Mr. Galani to move forward with the departments?
Yes.
Okay. Do we have a second on it? You'll second it. Deborah, Ms. McCutcheon has seconded it. Any questions or comments? Go ahead, Teresa.
I guess I'm probably the only one that doesn't understand the math. So the original contract was 103,000. Was there a contingency 10% on top of that for budgeted already, or we just went with a base? We didn't have a contingency?
It's an interesting question and a good question because the Department of Public Works usually puts in a contingency despite what the low bid is and the one that's accepted for the contract. The Department of Planning hasn't done that in the past. It's probably something that's going to move toward as we see these price hikes associated with materials, labor, et cetera. And so that's why in this instance, instead of having something built into the original contract, we are coming back with the change order. I would also add that the change order that went from approximately $104,000 to $135,000 was when we did the collective review of the Grand Tree and decided that it's certainly hard for the city of Wildwood to remove a healthy Grand Tree to accommodate a recreational amenity. So we did all the changes to the design, and those changes led to what I believe is a much better project. And I think in terms of the wall structure, a much improved wall in terms of aesthetics and character and stability. But as I say, this particular change order falls more on just the delays and the cost increases for a lot of the infrastructure materials these days.
I suppose that it's just, I'm a broken record, but that we need control plans done before we have a project in place.
Well, certainly we do our very best, as you know, Ms. Clark. I hope that we hire good designers, engineers. We challenge them to come up with the best design for the least cost of money. We are bound by our purchasing policy to do the bidding process. From that point, it's an argument of, do you anticipate changes in the project as you go along and incorporate them in the original contract? That's an option. But I always think from the department's perspective, at least the Department of Planning and Parks, if there are changes, you all need to know about them, particularly if they're, in my opinion, substantial enough that I don't feel comfortable proceeding forward. And so that's why we have a different approach, but I'm thinking my approach may not necessarily be the best one any longer.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead, Rob.
real quickly. Yeah, this is looking great. I was over there just a few days ago and this represents substantial progress since I was there. So they're really cranking along. I'm a little concerned with the proximity to the Grand Tree, but I think it's going to be fine. My only comment really is that it's been bugging me for months. I told Joe Garitano about it, who was the wrong guy, but there's a big poison ivy vine growing up the side of it. And I would like you to get rid of it before spring, because then it'll just fall down and nobody will see it.
Consider it done. I'll contact Becky with DJM. And just so you know, DJM, they're kind of branching out into project development. You know, for the most part, they were the experts on native grasses, prairie restoration. So I feel comfortable going to them and saying, you're doing this project, we're saving this Grand Tree. And by the way, take off the poison ivy.
There you go. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? All right, thank you very much. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, the Community Park Project. Mr. Boonich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, as you are aware, the department has over the last couple of months with the committee members presented some potential changes to Community Park. The first set that was endorsed by the committee, then City Council, relates to ADA improvements in association with the parking lot area and that crossing between the playground pavilion area and the dog park. As part of that discussion, the department did identify the tree well areas, 4 of which are in the playground area, and concerns that had been expressed by certain users about the depth of the tree wells and the potential for a fall. Knowing that, the department contacted the park designer TerraSpec, and they came back with a couple of options. Those options, for the most part, solve the problem on the exterior of the tree wells by creating barriers. Those barriers, in the opinion of the department, would be a distraction to the overall playground area and certainly would be effective, but change the character of it from the standpoint of the department. The department continued to challenge the park designer, and ultimately tonight I'm presenting you a plan I think is reasonable and will work. 3 of the tree well areas will only require the addition of some soil and mulch to eliminate the depth of them and therefore meet the minimum requirement for a fall onto a soft surface, which is the mulch and soil. Of those 3, 1 will require the area inlet to be raised 18 inches, which is a nominal cost, just adding, so to speak, rings to the current pipe system. The 4th and the largest of those, the park designer is recommending a similar approach in certain instances, but also adding a deck that would become another amenity in the playground. So we would build a deck, so to speak, into that area and cutouts around the trees themselves, and then reduce the depth and make it a play area or sitting area for parents and children. The cost of that has yet to be assessed. So tonight, the department is respectfully requesting authorization to proceed filling in the tree wells appropriately as described, and then seeking 3 bids for the decking to see what the cost might be.
Great. Any questions or comments for the department? Rob, go ahead.
I swear I'm about ready to shut up. Yeah, I went over and looked at this, and I guess my basic question is, who's complaining, and is there a real groundswell of support for filling in these tree wells? Because they really add to the character of the park. And if a kid takes a header off of the wall, he or she is gonna land in mulch or dirt anyway. And so it's just a modest hazard of play. And it's not a death trap over there. And so I'm wondering if we're solving a problem that doesn't really exist, because for every kid that, there are going to be a lot of kids that enjoy the play aspects of these tree wells just as they are today. They've got steps down into them. You can use them for forts. You can use them for houses. You can use them for all kinds of things. And the wall is no higher than the walls we're fixing to build at the Route 66 park, except that a kid will fall off of that onto concrete. So I'm wondering what problem we're really solving, and if it's just a few moms that are rightly concerned about their kids' safety, when just, across the road, there's something that's even less safe.
That's a very good question. And to date, we've had 2 complaints. And the complaints were that you've created a hazard for my child. That hazard needs to be addressed. So certainly from that perspective, the department felt obliged to address the hazard, because if we did not, there was always that risk that somewhere in the court of public opinion or an actual court, someone will say, well, you knew of the hazard and you did nothing. And that's not the situation the department would like to be placed in. Additionally, we've not had anyone file a insurance claim or any type of action regarding the tree well areas. So my assumption based on that is no one's been injured to date.
This is a truly lovely park. Those add immeasurably. I've had, tons of acclaim about this park from children that I've taken up there to play. And it's just a great park. And I would hate to make these changes. I'm not concerned about the trees. A layer of mulch is not going to hurt these. They're cottonwoods and a box elder, and I think there's a maple back in the back. There's nothing, and they're all young, so they're going to recover. If we could maybe just consider a few inches of mulch right along, the edges of the higher slopes, and we can fix that one. We can raise that, as you said, with a collar, that one drain, or maybe a couple of those drains. I think we can do this a little bit of soil and some mulch and not build the deck. And I would like to, I don't know if it's appropriate for me to make a motion to do that or what you're actually looking for, but I don't support going forward and building the deck just because there've been a couple of complaints.
So I think you're looking for a motion in which direction we want to send you in, I guess, basically.
Yes, I was seeking a motion to proceed forward with the work in 3 of the 4 tree wells. The 4th tree well being the one that has the proposed deck as a component. And I was just soliciting bids on that.
On the material you provided us, Joe, just so we're clear, which is the 4th one that you're
It's
referring to?
C, letter C as in cat. So it's the one
What if you don't
right
have any
about the
letters?
circle.
It's this one with the trees. It's the one with 5 trees in it.
Okay,
Over the
I don't have any letters. That's what I was asking. That's C.
The deck would basically be in the area of the highest wall, the tallest wall. So it would basically, for the most part, be in this area, and then we would just taper mulch up into that. So it would not, it's not well, it actually is intended to cover the entire space. So it's a low deck at the south end and a taller deck, so to speak, at the north end over the area inlet.
Okay, thank you. So Rob, what?
Yeah,
motion do
I
you
think
wanna make?
this could be a much cheaper, simpler modification that addresses the main concern. I don't know how to word that as a motion because it would take some specifics, and I kind of spelled them out to you. I think you know what I'm suggesting, but I don't think this committee should act on the basis of 2 complaints when there have been no injuries. It's just not that, it doesn't look hazardous at all.
So without putting words in your mouth, I think you were saying like to have Joe get a bid for mulch and dirt in the wells, but not get a bid for the decking and the other.
Yeah, go back and
City.
revisit this with just as he suggested, just, a smaller, simpler approach that will address the major concern without altering the character as much.
So Mr. Bartoni, after Mrs. Clark's comment or question, I would just respectfully request a postponement and I'll get back at it and
Sure,
bring you back
okay.
something better
Okay, go ahead, Teresa.
if the motion passes.
I had to go.
The one that I'm concerned, I would be concerned about is the drain.
I see.
That does look like, it could be a problem for children. I mean, kids love to climb and yeah, there's little kids around there too, but, I'm like, Rob, we could make this, safer, but not so expensive. And, I just, do we meet all of the legal standards for park safety? If we do, then do we have like a standard operating risk assessment for something like this?
The general rule of thumb is if you have a drop, I believe, over 42 inches, you need a railing. And so from the perspective of that well letter C, that far north end where that area inlet cap is, that probably is about 51 inches. So we have to address it up in that area. And we may be able to accomplish that by elevating it just slightly to that minimum distance. So that's the direction I would go. I won't proceed with anything. I'll get back with the park designer and then in February have you a revised proposal.
Great.
Mike, go ahead, and Deborah, you're next.
Yeah, I just,
Oh, were you done, Teresa? Sorry. Okay.
yeah,
I'm getting a little ahead of
I
myself.
agree with Rob and Teresa on this, and I just wanted to bring up, I think, number one, 2 complaints doesn't warrant action, investigation perhaps, which you've done, but action's another story. And second, I would say that, you know, it's a playground, and if you just look even within the vicinity of the pictures that are showing, there's significant number of other, I mean, the actual playground itself, your kid can climb up this thing and fall 15 feet. So, I mean, I guess I would advocate if you find it to be that treacherous, there's a lot of other much more volatile problems there that maybe don't go to the playground. But I will say that my final point is that I actually, my children grew up on this playground. And when my son, who was a boy, was 2 years old and, you know, into everything, he was jumping off these walls into these pits and on purpose and climbing up and down them. And he never so much as ended up with a scratch on his body. So once again, I mean, there's benches right there that kids could easily climb on and fall off. And to Rob's point, there's concrete all around the bench. There's everything else over there. And if you go past the pavilion over here too, there's a large creek bed over kind of where we're putting by the hard pickleball courts. And it's probably about 5 feet drop into that creek. So there's a lot of problems with that. So, I mean, if we want to address every possible safety concern, we could spend $5 to $10 million in this one area, making sure we had everything covered. So I would advocate a little bit of soil and some mulch at the very most.
Yep.
To address the minimal standards that are there. But, and to your point also, you said we have not had any incidents of reported injuries or problems there too. So I think that kind of speaks for itself.
Thank you, Mike. Deborah, go ahead.
Mostly, this one. So I think this is the real.
Yeah, we'll figure something out. Like I say, with respectfully requesting a postponement, a little more time and I'll see. Yeah, each iteration has improved the situation from going like making it basically a fence around them so that they were pretty much inaccessible to this. Hopefully the third try will be the winner.
We have a motion on the floor, but if we don't have a second, that's.
Yep.
And
He's got his time.
Next.
Yeah, postponement to look into the engineering again and ask them to come up with a less involved plan.
Yes, I want them to focus on the area inlets and that tree well C, where that area inlet is near the highest point of the wall. So that's where the focus would be.
I would also want them, like Deborah, to focus on the drain, because when water is flowing, a small child can fit through very small areas. And at least some kind of grading around it, the bottom of it, so that it's closed off for little feet and hands.
Can you add that, Joe, to your, add that to your homework?
Yes, and I will tell you that most of the curb inlets and area inlets, like you see here in this particular photograph, used to have some type of protection across them. MSD restricts that because what ends up happening, it gets blocked with material, then it floods the street. And in this case, if it gets blocked, we could create a nice little pond for a child to fall in and drown. So there's good and bad on either side of it, but we'll take a look at it and see if there's an approach that would be advantageous for both conditions.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor to postpone. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstained? Thank you, everyone. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, the sound and lighting contract for 2023. Ms. Ripito.
Thank you, Chair and members of the committee. Since 1996, the city of Wildwood has provided several concerts or events during the year that feature live music. These events are attended by thousands of people throughout the year, and as you can imagine, require a lot of partnerships, consultants, and various companies to assist us with making these nights as magical as they are. And the community has come to appreciate all of these events very much. Well, one of these consultants, Paul Finch Audio, has been providing lighting and sound for a number of years for the city. His company and his workers have always exceeded expectations and have established a great rapport with the bands and their members, as well as city staff, and the crowds that come to these events. So therefore, the department remains very happy with Paul Finch Audio and believes that he will continue to provide excellent service to the city. And therefore, the city contacted Mr. Finch to request a proposal for the 2023 events, which include 6 events total, 3 music on Main, 1 concert during the back to school party, and then 2 shows during Celebrate Wildwood. The total amount of the proposal is $14,800, which is about $1,400 more than the 2022 estimate they received. But now this estimate includes the setup for the sign language interpreters. And so the department recommends this attached proposal be considered favorably by the committee, and with a recommendation of support to go on to the city council for acceptance and passage, which would include all the components identified in the attached contract. Yeah, that I'm finished with my report. But again, we are here for any questions that you might have. No worries.
All right, Mike is very anxious.
I was gonna make the motion to approve the recommendation.
Oh, I love the enthusiasm.
Great. Do we have a motion? We have a second, seconded by Council Member Clark. Any questions or comments for the department? Teresa, go ahead.
I just want to thank the department for putting together these events, because people love them. They are so happy out there at the events, and so many people came last year. It was amazing. But just to remember that we spoke about a year ago about planning some of the events with lights that are not flashing, because some people get migraines or are triggered by these flashing lights and can't come to the event because of the flashing lights and the behind the music. So just to maybe think about adding some, or not adding, but talking to the lighting company and say, you know, we need to these certain events every other one or a couple a year or whatever we decide on.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure.
Ms. Clark, as you recall, you discussed that with me at one of the concerts, and I had a conversation with Paul Finch. He recognized the situation immediately, something that he deals with on a day-to-day basis as a sound and lighting person. So our intent is to at least have one, if not two concerts where there is lighting, but not the flashing lighting.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? All right, thank you very much. That takes us to the next item, the Centaur time trial. Mr. Bunich.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the committee, over the last 4 or 5 years, the city has hosted the Centaur Time Trial. It is one of 3 races held on the 3rd weekend of March. That includes 2 others in the St. Louis region. This particular time trial starts on Centaur Road, goes Centaur Road to Wild Horse Creek Road, Wild Horse Creek Road south to Hart Road, and then back on the same course. Over the years, the quality of competition has risen. There are professional riders now that participate, and they come from all over the United States. In conversations with the owner of Big Shark Bicycles, he said this is becoming rapidly one of the favorite time trials in the Midwest region. As part of the discussions in 2022 about cost and saving money and doing less with, let's say, our events, but highlighting the events as much as we can with the money available, Centaur Time Trial was not included as part of the recreation event schedule. The department contacted the organizer, the owner of Big Shark Cycles, and explained the circumstance to him. His response was, we certainly understand. We see this across the board with many of our communities, and they offered to basically cover all the costs if we would host the event, so to speak, on Centaur and Wild Horse Creek Roads. So tonight, I'm basically bringing to you this particular option. It's an option that was discussed by our program budget committee, 2 of which the members have participated in, shifting more of the cost to the private sector or the organizers than the city. So what they would offer is to pay for police services and any restroom facilities that we used to provide. Saying that, I will note that we do get certain complaints from residents along Wild Horse Creek Road about the inconvenience. The police do provide patrol service. The roads are not closed, and most are very accommodating. They drive slow and accommodate the bicyclists if they need to get out. We do notify them well in advance by letter of the event. But I do want to acknowledge that we still get complaints about the inconvenience caused. But tonight, the department is presenting the option to you. Do you want the city to host the Centaur Time Trial? They will be required to complete an event partnership agreement, which will address all of the costs being borne by the organizer, the liability component, the indemnification. And I've talked with the captain of the police and John Young, and certainly John Young likened this to a parade where a community organization wants to host a parade in a community. And he said that it's done all the time. So tonight I'm seeking your direction. Is it something we want to pursue, or do you prefer not? And I'll contact the organizer.
Great, thank you, John. Just to add on to what you said, I got a couple friends of mine that ride competitively, and they've also just pretty much said exactly what you said. This has become one of the more popular races in this area, and they really like it a lot. So
I'll make the motion to keep this going, especially if they're paying for it.
absolutely, yeah. Seconded by Councilmember Rambo. Any discussion or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Great, thank
Thank
you,
you.
and tell them thank you for picking up the cost and hosting and continuing to let us host it.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. That takes us to, I will cover them in unison, the next two items on the agenda, the in-person and virtual recreation programs and then the facility reservations. These are once again typically FYI items. Does anybody have any questions or comments for the department? Teresa, go ahead.
Sorry, I got so many comments tonight. Just on the tree lighting. If we could think about next year possibly adding a pedestal of some kind, maybe we already have one that we use at the events in the summer, but some kind of a pedestal for the interpreter to stand up higher than the crowd so that the deaf people could actually see them.
With your permission, in past years, the carolers had always kind of meandered around the crowd and stationed themselves at different locations. This was the first year they kind of picked the location by the tree and pretty much stayed there the entire day. And if that's acceptable to all of you, that's easy to do. They add that riser and just have the interpreter stand on that.
Great. All right. We don't have any, we don't have an executive session planned. I do for one thing under other matters or whatever. Deborah had reached out to us over the weekend. We weren't able to get this onto the agenda, but Deborah, if you want to, I don't want to get into like a discussion or a debate for sunshine purposes, but if you do have a comment for the department that you'd like to make. Correct, but that's what I'm saying. That's fine. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, Joe, you can help me remember to
Oh,
make sure it's on the
certainly.
next agenda and.
Now, I do have one update. We talked to Conoyer Landscaping. They're supposed to be out next week, weather permitting. It's going to be a cold week, but it looks like there's not much precipitation right now. So the landscaping should follow. I know there's some other issues out there. I went out there today. I saw Mr. Tripp. We talked to. It appears that the guilty party using the emergency access right now is Waste Connections. But I'm just, I know.
That's a big one.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. All right, that takes us to adjournment. Looking for a motion to adjourn. Made by Councilmember Galani, seconded by Councilmember Clark. Non-debatable. All those in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.